You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, early signing day live streams. We're doing this at the top of the hour in the morning, so we hope you tune in as well. We're talking about individual players throughout the day. You can have your say in the chat, so it should be a lot of fun. We're here for about 15, 16, 20 minutes, somewhere in there, and we're going to do this at the top of the next hour as well. So in the first hour, in the middle of the live stream, Suntarine Perkins committed, and we talked about that. And that reminds me of players that are playing in the national all-star games. You have Aiden Williams and Suntarine Perkins that are down in Orlando for the the Under Armour All-American game. You've got Braxton Myers that is in San Antonio for the All-America Bowl. Used to be the U.S. Army game. And you've got Kedrick Riscano that is at the Polynesian Bowl. So those are four players that I know of right off bat. So if you know of anybody else, just throw them in the chat as well. If I missed that, I apologize. But that is where I'm up to right now. Right now I'm trying to get credentialed and everything to cover Suntarine and Aiden down in Orlando and do some TikToks, do some neat things with that, and preferably an interview with both of them. That is the goal. So should be really fun there. Now, let's talk about Kedrick Riscano. And he is with Suntarine Perkins and Aiden Williams signing today. He kind of gets drowned out. Jamarius Brown as well. Kedrick Riscano is really good. He's a borderline top 100 player and a running back. And if you look at his film, the first thing that jumps out at you is his lateral movement. It's real similar to Quinshawn. Now, Kedrick is a 6 foot, 205 pound running back out of New Caney, Texas. Quinshawn Judkins, just an absolute horse. He's a different dude. But lateral quickness is something that you're seeing as a theme between Ole Miss's running backs. The lateral running ability is going to be important for what they're trying to do. And as you saw with Quinshawn Judkins, a lot of his success goes from like being able to change that angle or move a foot one way or the other to avoid a solid contact to where he could break a tackle. So that is something I'm really excited about with Kedrick Riscano. I'm really excited to watch him play next year. Quinshawn Judkins, him, and hey, we haven't heard one way or another from Zach Evans. Although after the bowl game, I assume we're going to have another round of people leaving. James Mendoza said, is there any chance we keep Luke or do we find some other backup quarterback? My theory on the backup quarterback is they probably are going to try and convince Kincaid Dent to stay another year. I think he has another year of eligibility. With this COVID year, it's confusing to me. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But I think they're going to try and prove him. They could always essentially take Luke Altmaier out of the portal, but I don't think Luke wants to carry a clipboard for a year. He's been through this. I think Luke is going to start over, clean break, and let it happen. Now, in the transfer portal, this is my thoughts on the quarterback position in the transfer portal. To me, you have two options. You can either get a body to hold a clipboard for a year, and in case of an emergency quarterback, or you can find a project for 3 years and hope that you can build him up to where he can at least back up Walker White a year, and that competition can happen after multiple years in the system. That is the two options that I think are going on right now in the portal. Like I said, they could keep Kincaid Dent and just roll the dice next year with Walker White. But if you look at what happened this year, I think they're going to have a backup plan to a backup plan for the future. You might see a situation where in 2024, they sign a kid like Walker White, and then they sign a 3-star kid that can essentially develop to hold the clipboard. But in case he's needed, he might be a higher ranking person. Are there any preferred walk-on quarterback serviceable as backups? I do not think so. Now, Ole Miss has some walk-ons. Ole Miss has walk-ons that are a little bit better than most places. And like when David Morris had to come in against Mississippi State, they're better than that. And that's not a shot at David or anything like that, but it's just the level of walk-on has gone up considerably in the last 20 years. But I don't think you want that guy playing a game. I think you want that guy to get as good as you can get and do what needs to be done. But if you're throwing a walk-on in at quarterback as a Power 5 school in the SEC, that is going to be problematic. This isn't Southern Miss. This isn't James Madison. That is the level where the preferred walk-on playing a game might be a place to go. My opinion is their whole goal was a resume line that they can hit the transfer portal in a couple of years and play at a North Alabama, play at an Austin Peay, something like that. That appears to be their level at the moment. But we'll see. I could be absolutely wrong. The question I would have is, why did they sign a preferred walk-on if they were good enough to be a scholarship player at this level? Maybe they wanted to try, and then I think they will reshuffle the deck as this moves further. That's my opinion anyway. So if you look at the big three in Mississippi, Jamarius Brown, Suntarine Perkins, Aiden Williams, all signed. Massive, absolutely massive. There's no other way you can put that other than how big of a deal that it actually is. When you add in the other All-Americans like Kedrick Riscano and Braxton Myers, it becomes a huge deal as well. And when you look at it right now, I just named half the signing class. This is a small signing class at this point. Now, there's two players that we're still waiting on. We're still waiting on Neil Avery, who somebody said in the chat last show that Maryland was making a strong push for, which I expect. He's a local kid. He's from Good Counsel. And Ahmad Brown out of Crisp County in Georgia has not signed. His LOI hasn't come in as well. So we're still waiting on them. And Caden Lee is announcing a little bit later on tonight. Now, I am probably going to wait to film the wrap-up show until after he announces, and we will talk about him as well. So I'm thinking somewhere around 7:30 record time, maybe 8:30 or 9 o'clock, we will actually post the video. And that will be the wrap-up show. Now, we need to talk about Bryson Sanders a little bit. Every time we talk about Bryson Sanders, something happens and my mind gets scattered and I move on to the next one. I am really, really excited about Bryson Sanders as an offensive lineman prospect. I think he can do all the stuff that Ole Miss needs him to do. He projects as an interior offensive lineman, but I think he's talented enough to play on the outside if he was given the opportunity. I think after what they did to NBA in the state championship game, Baylor School, that was a lot because of that offensive line running the ball. And the quarterback is 2024 Whit Muschamp. That's Will Muschamp's son, I believe. And we'll see exactly what happens. But I am really excited about Bryson Sanders as a potential offensive line candidate moving forward. Really, really like Brian. Now, let's talk about Bryson. Let's talk about Braxton. Let's talk about him in the All-American game. Let's talk about him at cornerback. We always talk that Ole Miss is trying to replace Miles Battle in the transfer portal, but maybe Braxton Myers is that guy. Maybe he can come in and play. Can Sanders play? Yes, I believe Sanders can, in fact, play center if he needs to. I've seen prospects from people that may even be putting him as a center prospect moving forward. But interior offensive line is where he is going to live, at least at the start, especially with two freshman tackles. We all know how recruiting services love tackles. They're in love with tackles. If you're an offensive lineman and you're a tackle, you're going to be higher than an offensive lineman and a guard. That's the way recruiting service works. Why? Because tackles are sexier and they want things that really pop. And everybody's concerned about tackles, so tackles get all the attention. not necessarily the interior players. That's the reason Caleb Warren was ranked as low as he was, coming out of a 1A school in Mississippi. He was a solid interior guard prospect, but it was hard to move the needle because he wasn't a tackle. I mean, just it is what it is, honestly. So we'll see exactly what he can do. But Braxton Myers at cornerback has a chance to be a fairly special player. Like I said, we're trying to replace Miles Battle back there instead of replacing DeAndre Prince. So you don't need a starter necessarily. You just want a really good player. And Ole Miss is in the transfer portal looking at John Saunders as 6'4" cornerback out of Miami, Ohio. And with that, almost the Miles Battle is a like-for-like type situation. So keep an eye on John Saunders. Keep an eye on the Texas A&M wide receiver, Chris Marshall. Keep an eye on, I think, Adari Halsey. Keep an eye on those guys. And Andre Carter, which I haven't heard much of lately, but I've heard earlier about. David Gibson says, we need more fans to join the collective. We may have more NIL money than 80% of colleges, but it's less than half of the SEC and only about a third of some programs. Yeah, the collective is a major deal. The Grove Collective, they need people. They're over 5,000 members. They honestly need to get that membership up to about 20,000 for Ole Miss to be significantly competitive, because Ole Miss doesn't have billionaires. Texas A&M has Texas oil money, so whenever they need to go back and get something, they're not on a tight budget like Ole Miss is. Ole Miss might have $10 million of NIL money, but that's what they have. Texas A&M might have $15 million in their NIL collective, but they can also go to a billionaire or two and ask for 10 or 15 more if that was necessary. Ole Miss doesn't have that luxury. So we need as many people to join the collective. It's going to have to be a true collective with Ole Miss to move forward as they go, because they can do it. It's just going to require that they do. Or situations like this Marcel Reed thing is going to keep happening. You're going to consistently get outbid because, like I said, Ole Miss can only go so high on a bid because they don't want to blow up the whole war chest over one player. They do want it spread out. The whole transfer portal would be destroyed if they overpaid on one player. So understand the reality going on right now at Ole Miss and in college football in general. Good point, David. All right. Now, I've talked about the big three. I've talked about Braxton Myers. I've talked about Bryson Sanders. And I want to talk a little bit about Skylar Mann. I talked about him in the first show just briefly, but I think he's an example of a player that benefits from the fact that we're really his system, if that makes sense at all. He's a little bit too little to be a linebacker. He's about 205 pounds. Now, he'll grow to 215, but he is what it is. He's a little bit too slow to be a safety, so he's kind of an undersized linebacker. Now, that's the reason he's ranked where he is, because if you take him in a normal system and he's a linebacker, what will his frame take? How will it be supported? He can't play back in the secondary and he's not a linebacker. Where do you put him? Do you put him in athlete? What do you do? This is a problem that happens. And remember, in recruiting, for anybody that's going through it, system is everything. System is going to determine whether or not you're an NFL player or if you are a 4-year and done player or even less than that. If you're a 3-time transfer portal joiner like the quarterback that was at West Virginia last year, Jaden Daniels. I think, not Jaden Daniels. You know who I'm talking about. JT Daniels. That's who I'm trying to say. So he is a fit for what we do at box safety. And I say that as a singular person because I think Suntarine Perkins is going to fill the other side, and it's going to essentially make this 3-2-6 a 3-3-5. Now, they're not going to do anything differently. Schematically, it's going to be exactly the same. But you can see they're getting a little bit bigger to try and combat the physics problem that they have. You've seen multiple times during the season teams line up with multiple tight ends against a undersized edge that Ole Miss has and attack that area over and over and over again to great success. We need to figure out how to mold what we're doing 3-2-6 wise, because it's very good in the pass game. If you look at Bryce Young's numbers over the last 2 years, he threw for like 340 yards and maybe even a couple of picks. They did a really good job against him. But teams that have been patient and running the ball, and I give credit to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt and Auburn, they're the ones that figured this out. And everybody started doing it, and they were going to do it until we stopped it, and we never stopped it. So we'll see exactly what happens. Colin Birchfield says, are we expecting any surprises today? The biggest surprise, I think, is potentially Caden Lee. I haven't heard if any of the other ones like Isaac Smith or Kelly Jones they've actually signed. Those would be the long shots. But the one that we have an actual surprise chance to get on signing day is probably Caden Lee. So we'll see exactly what happens to this Ole Miss defense moving forward. You can see they're recruiting the same type players. The recruiting hasn't changed over 3 years, so I don't expect anything schematically to change because they're recruiting players that fit that system. So what I think is going to change is they're going to try and find size-speed ratio guys to make that system a little bit more sturdy. I think that's what's going on right now. And I think they can. When you have a Joshua Harris in the transfer portal, I've seen him listed anywhere up to 350 pounds. That's a nose guard. That's a space eater. That is an A-gap guy that you can kind of do things a little bit differently. Maybe even move J.J. Pegues outside some. And all of a sudden you got 300-pounders on the defensive line, and that is going to be a big situation for them. Anyway, this signing day so far has gone pretty well. Like I said, the only thing that is preventing this class from honestly being a top-level high school class was what happened the other day. We're not going to dwell on that because we're in the portal moving on about it. Because Suntarine Perkins, an all-timer in the state of Mississippi high school football player. Tony Connor, Marcus Dupree, N'Kobe Dean, that level, that conversation. Aiden Williams, any other year would be the top player in the state of Mississippi. And it wouldn't be particularly close. But since Perkins is in the state, all of a sudden Aiden drops down to number 2. And Jamarius Brown is just somebody that has grown and grown and grown. And I don't know if he's going to grow like J.J. Pegues into a 3 technique, or if we are looking at an undersized guy that defeats people with quickness. That is the real question. All right, we're going to come back in about an hour. Hopefully there's a little bit more news. We haven't heard from Neo Avery or Ahmad Brown. Those are 2 signees that we're waiting to come in. And tonight will be the Caden Lee announcement. I think he's announcing it like 6:30. So that'll be after the live streams, but we're going to try and do our wrap-up show before then. James Thomas says, I'm happier about getting Perkins than I am about losing Reed. You should be, James. Suntarine Perkins is a generational prospect in the state of Mississippi. He does special things. Bradley Voll says, what about Chris Marshall? He changed some of his stuff to Ole Miss on Twitter. I saw that. I think Ole Miss is the prohibitive leader at this point. And if you just want to ask my opinion, after what happened with Marcel Reed, I think they're going to go all in to sign Chris Marshall. Just almost for optics. And Adari Halsey, who was a freshman All-American from New Mexico, could also come. How does Aiden Williams compare to Laquan Treadwell? Now, Euler Reb 48 asked that question. Honestly, not well. They're different type wide receivers. I would compare Aiden Williams almost to a Dante Moncrief more than a Laquan Treadwell. Treadwell had issues. He could catch the ball in tight windows, but he almost had to. He had separation problems. And that has plagued him in the NFL, even though he's been in the league for 10 years at this point. But Dante Moncrief could be a little bit more dynamic, but maybe having less of the catch radius than Laquan. I think Aiden Williams compares more closely to Dante Moncrief. And I don't think either one of them are A.J. Brown, because A.J. Brown was just a bully. So that is what I'm thinking is going on. I do think that Aiden Williams is ahead of Jonathan Mingo at the same time in the recruiting process and the development process. Del Rice says, I listen to you at work every morning. My first time catching you live. Appreciate it, Del. Thank you very much. David Holly says, please give a quick definition of box safety. Yes, absolutely. Box safety is basically a hybrid rule that was created to mimic what outside linebackers did in the 3-4 defense, but also could do some safety type stuff. So a box safety would be a safety that lives near the line of scrimmage. They would be box players. That's the reason we call them box safeties. But they would be undersized. They would be what we have, 195, 205 pounds going in there. Now, the problem that we have with our box safeties right now, and what we do, is teams have realized they can line up with two tight ends and attack that edge. And you can run at them with 250-pound blockers for 200-pound, essentially a tight end on a defensive back. So in my opinion, when I talk about physics problem, that is what I'm talking about, is trying to beef up that box safety, make them a little bit bigger, if that makes any sense, David. So, we've done 2 live streams this morning. We got one more coming. We're going to do one at the top of the hour at 11 as well. And then we're going to do our wrap-up show with Kara McCutcheon tonight. And we're going to talk about this class overall. Like I said, it was a good day. Today's been a good day. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get used to these small signing classes. And, we'll see we'll see what goes on with that. But yeah, just because this class is small does not mean it's bad. That's the important thing to know. Look at average stars of who signs, of the signing class, and kind of go from there. That is my advice to everybody. But this is going to be a relatively small class. Going to be a relatively small class. We will see you in about 40 minutes for our last live stream of the day. This has been a lot of fun, guys. Thank you very much. And we'll see what's going on. But anyway, this has been the second live stream of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Peace.